Hi, I'm Wendy Burge. Welcome to the Radiant Edge podcast, the podcast for soul-led experts building bold, aligned businesses. I'm here to help you create a business that feels just as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. Because you're not here just to sell, you're here to lead movements, shape ideas, and amplify your radiance. This podcast will help you claim your radiant edge, your unique positioning, voice, and value to help you do this. So welcome back to episode number 2. This is very exciting. I am thrilled to talk to you today. I've had a number of ideas of what I want to say and constantly keep pen to paper. But I wanted to jump into this next episode, since this is a brand new podcast, to talk about positioning and why positioning is so important when we start to step out boldly and claim our space as an expert or a thought leader. And what does that really mean moving forward for you, especially if you've been somebody who has worked for an extensive period of time within an industry, you're known as a subject matter expert, and you've decided that at this stage of your life, at this point in your career, that you wish to move forward and build your own consultancy, maybe go out on your own. Possibly you've been offered an opportunity to bring your ideas forward on a project and you never considered yourself being self-employed this way. And now you're sitting here on the edge or a precipice of going, okay, what do I do next? And how do I actually sell what I know? And I've always been very curious about this is, coming from a family of professionals, there's this point in their careers where the knowledge becomes even more valuable than their time. And that's kind of what led me on this journey of understanding positioning. And what I want to talk about with positioning today is when you get to this stage, there's this place where you want to understand how to package what you know, not just sell what you do. I'm going to say that again. You want to understand how to package what you know, not just sell what you do. There is a huge distinction when we transition from being a technician in the business, doing all the things, to now being a leader around a subject or topic. You're an expert around a solution. You may have even developed your own processes or intellectual property around a methodology of how something can really be more effective or efficient. Sometimes it can be very technical, and other times it can be more abstract in the sense that when I work with clients who are more in the realm of the peopling, as in, HR, leadership, or executive coaching, or personal development, or any of the healing arts, there is a point when we need to start describing what we do. It requires a whole other way of communicating that value proposition. And when we've been stuck in that technician role, we're used to talking at such a high level that the intricacies that we are fascinated with becomes lost on the person we're speaking with. I wonder if you have not experienced this like I have, because, when you love what you do, you start talking about it, and then all of a sudden people look at you like, wow, you need a life outside of this. But what I find happens is that we become incredibly technical. We get into the weeds. We are just talking about the thing that we love, and we lose them. And then you look over in the conversation and they're looking at you like a deer in the headlights. Like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about anymore. The challenge is, if you stay in that level of communication, you are never going to be able to sell your solution, because your particular prospect, your particular buyer, does not necessarily have the aptitude to understand your depth, and nor should they. So I'm going to step back for a second and talk about what that means. My best example is this. Imagine yourself as a new student on a campus. You are now a freshman. You are so excited about something, or you're struggling with something. You're like, okay, I'm very nervous about starting school. I just need to know what I need to do. I want the direction. I'm not really sure what I'm signing up for with some of these classes. And you go and have a conversation with an instructor, and all of a sudden, they're talking at 400 level biochem. This biochemistry class is so convoluted, it's so complicated, and it's a 400 level class, and yet here sits this freshman. That freshman, that first year student, has absolutely no idea about the language. They don't understand the application. They don't understand concepts, theories, principles, or practices. So we need to step back and understand when we start speaking in these very in the depths kind of conversations with people about the thing that we do, we often lose them because it's like handing a 400 level textbook to a freshman. And that freshman sits back completely overwhelmed and says, gosh, I thought I just signed up for science. I don't understand. And all of a sudden, you're asking them to make a decision. Do you want this? And when we see that, one of our first notions is to jump in and start explaining. And all of a sudden, we're just in this conversational cul-de-sac trying to give people information that they just honestly cannot handle. So why is positioning important? Well, I have seen this over and over and over again throughout my career working with professional services, where the people who are in the know, the people who are the experts, try to explain things to people who are not, with the assumption that they should already know a lot of these base foundational ideas, and they continue to speak further and they just miss the point. So to stay on track with this conversation, it's so important for you to understand the distinct difference between marketing conversations and delivery conversations, in the sense of how you're going to do something is a delivery conversation. But marketing conversation sounds completely different than delivery conversation. Marketing conversation is about what they need to know and why they need to know it. Very, very different. It is the key missing link to most people's communication strategies when they move away from being an employee or holding a very high level position inside of an organization, and then they shift over into selling their own services themselves. They can get away with it for a while within their own network of people who already know what they do, but if they go beyond their network, a lot of times people have no idea what they're talking about, and then they hit a wall. They've spent a ton of money on building out marketing, and they think that they're able to talk about stuff, and they really do not understand what positioning is. Years ago, I started a clinic with my ex-husband, and I had practitioners in varying different modalities trying to sell what they did, and they would get so into the weeds with their patients that I was like, you're never going to get new patients or referrals because nobody can explain what you're doing for them. So let's step back again with this conversation. Let's talk about what positioning is. Positioning is really about understanding what problems you're solving, who benefits from that solution, why they have that problem in the first place, and even more critical, how did they get themselves there? How did they find themselves in a state of distress that they need to find a solution that you can actually deliver for them? You've got to look at the perspective here. The person who's sitting on the other side of this conversation could be saying, I don't know how to get my team to invest in this kind of a solution. And maybe you as a consultant are stepping in and you're saying, okay, let's talk about this. I see these things happening, but the leadership team that's already established, the client that's sitting in the problem, there have been a number of things happening ahead of time that brought them to this point, and now they're stuck. And you're standing there looking through this glass plate window going, I can fix this. I've done this before. So there's this disconnect. Your positioning allows you to re-engineer this whole conversation and start from the place where you can meet them. You must meet people where they're at when you go to begin this conversation as the expert, as the authority. From there, when you start delegating out why this problem exists in the first place, where they find themselves, what do they want instead, you can start having more of a conversation that's reflective of the outcome that that particular person wants, or that organization or that team needs, versus you trying to push a narrative to them that is overwhelming, like the 400 level textbook. So your true positioning comes when you can step back, understand, well, here's the solutions I solve, but now I need to be listening to my client or my prospect's language. And this becomes incredibly powerful. Now, imagine there really are no problems. There's just a lack of awareness. And if you can understand that, you can stop feeling like you need to push a conversation and actually pull the person in. In my experience, most people in most organizations, it's not that they don't understand, they just don't have the awareness. They lack the perspective of why the problem's happening in the first place. So positioning allows you to really bring forward the solution along with helping qualify the problem. And as we understand that most of the time, problems evolve around a couple of things. Either there's a lack of knowledge, they just don't know what they don't know, or they don't understand how to look backwards and make sure their foundations are set before they move forward, so they fell into a gap or a hole. They don't have the resources. Maybe the team is underfunded. Maybe somebody doesn't have the time. Maybe somebody doesn't the right kind of leadership. So there may be lack of resources for them to resolve a problem, and they just don't know what the next step looks like for them. Or they don't have the skills. I see many times over, they're delegating out specific skill sets or tasks and requirements and needs because they just don't have the skills either themselves or within their team or organization. And that's where you become really valuable. So if you can sit back and understand that a lot of times when we talk about problem solutions, what are the bigger problems? Problems from the perspective of your client or prospect sounds very different than you, the person who owns the solution, because they don't necessarily see it from the same vantage point you do. Imagine the last time you were sitting in the middle of a challenge and you thought, God, if there was just somebody who could just tell me what my next steps would be. Well, guess what? That's what you can do for them. Now, the beauty of positioning allows you, once you understand how to really engineer a conversation, then you can extrapolate the bigger conversations, the more interesting conversations around your own unique perspective of why this particular approach works better, why this came about, what that backstory is for you. Why do you know this information? How did you come to this conclusion? That is where thought leadership emerges, is once you understand what is going on for your buyer, how to solve the problem, what your solution does for them, you have this really rich dialogue now as thought leadership. I've been working with this for over 17 years in my business. And one of the things that I found is that while that may sound big and juicy and fun to unpack, there is this very interesting space that clients would slip into. It's so much easier for people to over-intellectualize everything. But if they haven't embodied it, they don't see themselves in this really unique and valuable way of what they're bringing forward has intrinsic value, that becomes a problem around their positioning. And what happened was I could help them give all this information, really organize some great strategy, but they would never take action. They would stay too long overthinking. They would dim their light down. They would get distracted doing something else. Or as my coach always says, they would stay in the library and not get into the lab. They would overthink everything because they themselves could not embody this and say, wow, that person that we've created on paper surely cannot be me. Like, I know I've done these things, but there was this disconnect. And for a long time that really frustrated me. And then over the last while, I started integrating another application to my work that allows me to go back to my roots as a psychotherapist, a counselor, and a coach. And what I found, it's just completely shifted the game using human design. When I can say, hey, listen, not only is this you, the things that you've done, but let's really look at you, the person. It adds richness to this conversation around positioning when I can help my clients understand, wow, this really is my gift. Wow, these are really the areas I am talented. Wow, I didn't realize people really resonated with me when I was doing X, Y, and Z. Or I just innately do this because it's just who I am. And I don't have to push this part because it's just my energy. It's just who I am. It's just my essence. And for me, this allows us to bridge this place between spirituality, personal development, personal brand and business development. For me, that has been the melting pot of this juicy conversation of helping people get paid for what they know, not just what they do, because they want to be paid for being themselves. They want to show up and just be themselves. Well, let me tell you, this is how we do it. So I'm going to leave you with this. Start investigating, what is it that you solve? But more importantly, why is it a problem for the person who's experiencing the issue? What's happening prior to them coming to that point where they need to reach out? I want you to start thinking and shifting your perspective about your approach with your work, not from a delivery standpoint. You've got that locked in. You are at 400 level. You could write textbooks and playbooks. You are the veteran in this. But we are talking about marketing, and we're talking about communicating and getting your thought leadership out into the world in a way that helps people understand what exactly they're missing and the solution only you can provide. And with the help of a little bit of insight around who you are as a person, it allows you to just relax, step forward, really embody and embrace your own innate wisdom and your own resonance and energy. And this becomes completely magnetic and intoxicating in a way that you feel so emboldened and empowered because you confidently know this is the work I'm meant to do. This is how I can help, and this is why I can step forward with clarity and confidence, knowing that the decisions I make for my work really can create a greater impact. So I want you to think about this. If you have questions, I'm a real life person who works with real life clients. Please reach out to me. I appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a radiant day.